Hello, everyone. Gretchen, I see you joining us.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. How fun that we're having this conversation.
Yes. Wait, Gretchen, for some reason, you are not showing up for, oh, now you are. Amazing.
Okay.
See your beautiful face. Welcome. So excited to have you. I can't wait to dive into all things life in five senses. For those of you that are part of the Sonder fam, it's such an honor. We have done work inspired directly from Gretchen Rubin, and to have her in the house today is truly a life dream come true. I told Gretchen this a couple of days ago, actually, that I started Silk and Sonder in part because I was so inspired by the Happiness Project ages ago when I was a software engineer. So excited to be, in this full circle moment. But for those of you that I haven't had the luxury of meeting as yet, I'm Meha Agrawal. I'm the founder and CEO of Silk and Sonder. We are a self-care brand that is reimagining guided journaling and emotional health tracking through pen to paper and community. So our customers receive a beautiful guided journal in the mail, as well as access to our companion mobile app that houses our community and expanded content through audio guided reflections and everything else under the sun. So if you don't have Silk and Sonder, feel free to download the app. We're going to be talking about Gretchen Rubin's book all month long in August. So we'll definitely want to continue the conversation. And if you haven't bought the book, it looks like this. It's so pretty. I truly believe in judging books by their cover because not only is it pretty, yeah, we all do it. It's great. It's awesome. I just read it this past week and I can't recommend it enough. So be sure, we'll be dropping the links in the chat. Be sure to order it if you haven't yet read it. No worries. We're going to give you a little preview, but we won't reveal all the details. So Gretchen, we are going to get into your official impressive bio. I'm going to read it out loud, and then we're going to hear in your own words kind of the behind the scenes, overarching story. So I'll start. I know many of you are familiar with Gretchen. You've probably seen her speak, read her work, but let me tell you that Gretchen Rubin is one of today's most influential and thought-provoking observers of happiness and human nature. She's known for her ability to convey complex ideas from science to literature to stories from her own life, which we'll see today, with levity and clarity. She's the author of many best-selling books, such as The Happiness Project, Better Than Before, and The Four Tendencies, which have sold millions of copies in more than 30 languages. Her most recent book, which is why we're all here today, is Life in Five Senses. She's also host of the popular podcast Happier with Gretchen Rubin and founder of award-winning Happier app, which would be a perfect pair to the Silk and Sonder app. So be sure to download that too, which helps people track their happiness boosting habits. Gretchen Rubin has been interviewed by Oprah, eaten dinner with Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman, walked arm in arm with the Dalai Lama, had her work reported on in a medical journal, been written up in the New Yorker, and been an answer on Jeopardy. I mean, that is goals, Gretchen. Congrats to you. After starting her career in law, she realized she wanted to be a writer while she was clerking for Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, and she was raised in Kansas City and now lives in New York with her family. I mean, forget about chasing gold stars. You are the gold star, Gretchen. So it is awesome to have you here. But like I said, here at Silk and Sonder, we like to get to know people even beyond the impressive bio. So tell us, who were you as a little girl born and raised in Kansas City, and then leaving your career in law to be a full-time writer? Tell us everything, and then we'll get into our formal Q&A.
Okay, I'll do sort of the personal track and then the professional track. And it's so fun to be talking to you tonight. I'm so excited. Like, we're interested in so many of the same things.
Yes.
It's going to be hard for us to quit.
I know.
But so, yeah, as you mentioned, I was born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri. For those of you who know your Kansas City, whether you're in Kansas or Missouri is very important to us from those who are there. So I'm from the Missouri side, but I lived on state line for many years. So it was that kind of thing where you could cross the street and be in another state, which blew our minds as kids. And I had sort of like the very kind of, if you drew a crayon picture of kind of suburban life, that was me. I had a mother and a father. I have a sister. If you listen to the Happier with Gretchen Rubin podcast, you know all about my
I heard
sister
that.
because she's the
Yes.
co-host of my podcast.
Yep.
She is 5 years younger than I am. So was a pretty big gap when we were younger, but then, you know, as you get older, how those, you
My
know,
sister is 5 years younger than me.
but
What a
and you know,
coincidence.
right. But when you're young, that's a huge chasm,
Huge.
right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then when you're older, it kind of goes away. And so with one, you know, and a dog,
Yeah.
and so I really hit the jackpot. I hit the parent jackpot. I have two great parents who really now that I'm a parent myself, I realize, you know, it's really hard to be
It's
a
hard.
parent. I don't know if
Yeah.
you all have noticed this. So I was really fortunate in my parents, both of whom are still like, you know, cruising around, planning a trip to
Totally.
London in the fall. So I feel incredibly lucky. And so then I went from Kansas City to the East Coast for college. So I went to Yale, and then I went to Yale Law School, which is where I've met my husband.
Oh.
We are in law school, we called like our work areas
Uh-huh.
carrels. That was sort of
Yeah.
the word we used. And so our
Yeah.
carrels were back to back. So
Oh
that's
my
how I met
God.
him, because of my time in the library, time well
So
spent.
cute.
And I had love at first sight. You know, it's not always right,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it doesn't happen to everybody, but I remember the first time I saw him and I was just totally lost my heart.
Oh my
So
gosh. Love and Law.
love, yeah,
How
love
cute.
him. Yeah.
That could be your next book.
Yeah. So we got engaged pretty quickly. This, that, and the other thing. We had two daughters. I mean, my daughters are 6 years apart. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, just
Very
the way
similar.
the way
Yeah.
it worked out. Yeah. And they also are very close.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so we lived in DC briefly because I was clerking, as you said. And then we live in New York City. We've lived here. I had this bonkers realization that I have lived in this apartment in New
Uh-huh.
York City longer than I lived in Kansas City in my whole
Oh,
life. And I
wow.
couldn't believe it. And I told my sister, and she realized she's lived
In
just
her.
1 year less
Oh
in
my
her house in
God.
LA. So you just,
That is
time is so
crazy.
different.
Yeah.
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 So, and I have a dog now,
That's
a
awesome.
Cockapoo Barnaby. So on the professional side, as you said, I started out my career in law. So I went to law school, and for all the wrong reasons, right? I drifted into it. It's a great education. I can always change my mind later. I'm good at research and writing. It'll give
Yeah.
me a lot of options. And then come to find out, it's a really good preparation for being a lawyer.
Yep.
But I was clerked on the Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, and then I clerked for Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. And that's when I realized that I really wanted to be a writer. And then I worked briefly at the Federal Communications Commission, and that's when I was starting. I didn't know how to what to do, so I went to the bookstore and got a book called How to Write and Sell Your Nonfiction Book Proposal, and followed the directions. And that's how I made the shift. And now, I've written 10 books. This is the 10th book, Life in 5 Senses. And so that brings me to today.
That's awesome. So exciting. And also just, I feel like it's always this culmination of moments when you kind of wake up and you're like, I checked all the boxes, but something isn't sitting right. What do I want to do to fix this? And I think it's just amazing. I mean, to have that realization and then go after it, you know, we call that inspired action at Silk and Saunders. So awesome. Yeah. So let's get into it. Thank you for everyone who submitted their questions ahead of time. Feel free, as we're chatting, if you have additional questions that you want answered by Gretchen, drop them in the chat. Our team will do their best to filter them out. And if we get time, we'll definitely cover it. So getting into Life in 5 Senses, tell us what prompted you to write this book in the first place.
Well, talk about inspired action. I had kind of a wake up moment. Yeah. I am a person who tends to get pink eye conjunctivitis. So I had a bad case. So I went to the eye doctor. And as I was getting ready to leave, he said to me very casually, like, wear your sunscreen or drink enough water. He said, come back for your regular checkup, because as you know, you're more at risk for losing your vision. And I was like, what are you talking about? I don't know that. Like, why? And he said, oh yeah, you're severely nearsighted. And that means you're more at risk of having a detached retina. And if that happens, it can affect your vision. We would want to catch it right away. Oh, wow. And I have a friend who did lose some of his vision because of a detached retina. So that felt like a very real possibility to me. So sort of in shock. I went out to the street. I was getting ready to walk home because I live in New York City. I was going to walk home, and I'm thinking, of course I could have a rich, meaningful life if I lost one of my senses. But so often we don't appreciate what we have until we lose it, or we fear that we might lose it. And I was looking around and thinking, the cityscape around me is so precious to me. And yet realizing I didn't notice one detail on my way over. I was stuck in my head. I missed everything. And now I'm saying, oh my gosh, like it's so important to me. And kind of as I was having that realization, it was like every knob in my brain got jammed up to 11. And it was just like all of a sudden I could see every detail with crystal clarity. I could hear every sound on a separate track. I could smell every smell. New York City can be quite smelly. And the whole walk home, it was like that. It was like this transcendent, it was almost psychedelic experience because it was, but the thing is, this was happening all the time. There was nothing special about that moment. It was just that I was paying attention. And, and as we were talking about, I've been studying happiness, for many years. And I knew there was something that I was missing. I knew there was a piece that I hadn't fit into the puzzle. And like this walk showed me this was what was missing. It was this connection with my 5 senses into my body. And this was the way I could connect with myself and with other people and with the world. It was through the 5 senses. And then like, that was just like the moment that was it. That was it.
Wow. And I guess when you were doing the research and the work for this book, what surprised you in the process?
I'll tell you, this is something that surprised me. And I think we all intellectually know it, but then when you really think it through, it becomes very surprising. So you might say like, oh yeah, sure. We all live in different sensory worlds because like we have genetic differences, like maybe you're a super taster, or maybe you have color blindness. And then we all have, cultural things that, and our own experiences and, and so it all adds up to something slightly different. But when you really look at it, it's so one example, say in the chat if you remember the dress, like was it white and gold or was it blue and black? Meha, what did you see? Do you remember the dress? What color did you think it was?
That one I saw white and gold.
So did I. And I literally can't, a lot of times with an optical illusion, you can see the duck.
Or it's funny. I'm seeing in the chat, it was pretty half and half with most people. Well,
blue and blacks. You're right. That is the actual color of the dress. So that was, so that's one example, but then there's other examples. Like you can't smell your home the way a guest smells it. If I came over to your house, it would smell like nothing to you because you're so familiar with it. But to me, it might have a very or I worry that people come into my house and are like, oh, it smells like dog food. I don't know that. I'm like kind of gotten a little paranoid. Or like I live in New York City and sometimes I'll be doing something like this and people will say like, oh, I hear all the sirens. I don't even hear the sirens because my brain is just like, oh, there's sirens all the time. We're just going to move that to the back. You don't need to know it. And so I think this is why we really need to show compassion for ourselves and compassion for other people, because if you're like, this is really like this noise in this restaurant is just really making this unpleasant. And somebody else is like, what's the big deal? It's like, yeah, it's not a big deal for you, but that doesn't mean it's not real for me. Like that's, or if you're in an open office place and somebody's like, hey, why don't we just play music? That helps everybody concentrate. It's fine to say, you know what, that doesn't work for me. Or this sweater, I can't wear it. It's too scratchy. Or, I'm very sensitive to tell me in the chat if you're like this, like energy efficient light bulbs sometimes have a really, really ugly light. And I've like wanted to leave places because I'm like, it's just
my mom's the same way. And I was like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? Like, why do you keep wanting the light shut off? And she's like, I can't explain it, but
you know what? I almost wondered, like, do I have like different rods and cones from other people? Because I'm like, are you seeing what I see? Because I like, why? It's like, to me, it's like this orange green, but other people don't, it doesn't seem to bother them. So, so it's just this idea that like, we're all in our own brew of sensations. And if your kids are complaining or your coworkers complaining or your sweetheart's complaining or you're complaining or you're tuned into something and nobody else seems to understand what is so beautiful or what's so great. It's like, we can try to learn from each other, but then we also have to like really try to think about, well, if something's not working for you, how do I try to get to a place where we both feel comfortable?
Totally. That's awesome. And probably something unexpected, right? Like as you were starting.
Oh, 100%. I had no idea. I mean, because I was so stuck in my head. I literally didn't know my own preferences. Like there are things where I'm like, I didn't know that I'm very, very sensitive to touch. And I
Yeah.
didn't know that about myself. This was like a huge revelation. I'm extremely sensitive to touch. I'm sure you're very sensitive to touch because you're so all about like weight
Yeah.
and texture and
Yeah,
all that.
totally.
But
That's
I
my
like,
first love language, by the way, is touch.
there you,
So
my
yeah.
husband's too.
Oh, really? What's yours?
Physical touch. Mine's words of affirmation.
Oh, of course.
Because
I
I
mean,
always
the
want the gold
writer.
star.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's talk about neglected sense.
Yes.
Why is it important? And we'll get into mine
Yes.
and yours and
Yes.
everyone here, but
Yes. And
why
it's
is
been
it important to
so,
identify?
and it's been so fun. I saw as people were coming in, a lot of people
Yeah.
were putting them in. So this is the thing about neglected sense. So with an appreciated sense, we're interested in it. We like to learn about it. We like to
Yeah.
talk about it. We like to have adventures. We use it to connect with other people.
Yeah.
We turn to it for comfort and pleasure. Like we harness the power of
Yeah.
that sense.
Like touch.
Yeah, like for you touch.
Yeah.
But with our neglected sense, this is low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
This is a sense that you're overlooking. And so you're not using it
Yeah.
to have adventures. You're not learning about it. You're not
Yeah.
using it to connect with other people. You're not turning to it for comfort and pleasure. Often you might be much more focused about avoiding the downside of that sense
Yeah.
than harnessing the upside of that sense. And this can be really great because this is a bunch of stuff for you to try to bring into your life where there's probably a lot of opportunity because it's something that you've been neglecting.
Yeah.
Now, it's always great to tap into your appreciated sense because you
Yeah.
appreciate it, but you probably have already built that into your life.
Yeah.
And so, you're already doing that. Whereas with the
Mhm.
neglected sense, you can bring that element in.
That's
Okay.
okay.
So Meha, what is
Yes.
your neglected sense?
My neglected sense is seeing.
Okay.
What does that mean?
Okay. So I have a couple
Diagnose
thoughts.
me.
Okay. So here's the thing that would have surprised me. Okay. So for people who like really know the science of quiz taking and everything, I'm going to say something and you're going to say, but Gretchen, you can't judge from the result of your quiz because you have selection bias, which is 100% true. So I'm
Yeah.
not saying this is scientifically valid. But
Yeah.
I'm saying now that tens of thousands of people have taken the quiz, what is surprising is that it's very evenly distributed among the 5. Surprisingly,
Interesting.
right? You would think that there would be some that would be more than
Yeah.
others. And here's the thing. Before I saw the results, I thought almost no one would get seeing because
Wow.
we're wired for sight. It's the most
Totally.
real estate in the brain. If there's a conflict in among the senses, that one usually trumps. So I thought no one would get seeing, but
Yeah.
it's about equivalent. So here's my question for you. When people, and we all use sight, people who are sighted use sight a lot.
Yep.
But do you find that you use sight so much in your work that it's kind of a busman's holiday for you? That when you turn to something for comfort or pleasure, you don't feel like going to sight. You feel like maybe listening to music, or you like taste or
That's
smell,
so
because
interesting.
you're kind of overusing it. Like, because I talked to someone who was worked in movies, and she goes like, all day long I'm watching and thinking and editing.
Yes.
When I come home, I want to shut my eyes and listen to music. Do you have that sense of
Absolutely.
like,
I
it's
mean,
not the pleasure, it's not the comfort?
and it's so interesting when you say it that way. I mean, I'm on my screen all the time. I'm either on my
Yes.
phone or my laptop, constantly responding to emails or
Right.
prepping for something. And so when I get a moment for pleasure, I'm immediately, and so much of Silicon Thunder is built on this, it's all about disconnecting. And how do you
Yes.
disconnect? You stop watching things and looking at things. You listen,
Yes.
you go for dinner and you taste or whatever.
And
But it's
someone says dancing. Somebody's
Dancing.
saying they know you. You love
Yes,
dancing.
I do love dancing. Haven't been great about putting that in my habit tracker, but I do love dancing. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's where like hearing and, touching and like all of that comes to play. But yeah, I guess that's what it is.
Well, whereas you could imagine that if somebody worked in like sound, like, for my podcast,
Yeah.
I have an engineer, and he spends all day long listening, moving tracks around. And now he loves music anyway. He's like the guy who does
Yeah.
for work what he does for pleasure. But you could imagine that someone like that would love to like walk around a park and have
Yeah.
silence and just be looking with their eyes, and just their ears, like their sense of hearing is like very much receding.
Yeah.
And they are like, so part of it is what's underused and that you can bring to the surface more, because there's so much pleasure to get. So for you, because you still want that sense of disconnection, you might say something like, well, maybe I could tap into it like by going to museums or
Yeah.
walking in nature.
Yeah.
And or maybe like looking through books that have like beautiful, again, artworks, or like if you love architectural drawings or whatever, and trying to find new for like a kind of a similar thing is a lot of people have said that they deliberately neglect their sense of smell because for some people it can trigger migraines or allergic reactions. And so they're like, I actually go out of my way to avoid my sense of smell. But then what they're saying is like, well, now that I think about it, I can walk by the ocean and really enjoy the smells of the beach, the seawater, the seaweed, the breeze, because I don't have a negative effect of that. And so I can bring the pleasure of smell into my life, but I just have to think about it, how to do it in the way that's right for me as an individual. It's like, okay, no, I'm not, going to get the scented candle because that's not going to do it for me, but there's other ways. Or the smells of cooking. You might say like, oh, really think about aromatic herbs and things, and get your pleasure that way. If other kinds of smells, artificial smells or other kinds of smells are not working for you.
Is the goal to have equal weight on all 5 senses? Like, is that the ultimate goal?
You know what? I've actually never thought about that way. The way I've been thinking about it is more about bringing it into balance, because I think you're right. It's like, I think because of screens, it's like some things, it's like we're both like under and over
stimulated.
Stimulated. Yeah. So like you're watching a movie and there's all this sight and like musical soundtrack, but there's no smell, there's no air in your face, or like you're eating a snack food and it's like, it's hyper processed to hit every bliss point, but you didn't smell like the drifting scent of baking or grilling, like building your anticipation. And so it's kind of like too much and not enough. So I think about it in terms of being like bringing in balance, but this idea of like, are you really trying to bring them all to the fore as much as you can? I think absolutely. I never thought about it. It's kind of an obvious thought now that you said it. But I think because to me, I'm like, they're all so full of opportunity for engagement, and like they all evoke memory and they could spark our creativity. Like, you want to use all of them. And I think some people really are tapped into more of them. And then some people tend to like go up into our heads. So for some people, it's a much more deliberate process. And some people are much more kind of automatically connected.
And I wonder, like, in those moments where if people are on vacation, for example, I feel like there I'm paying attention to sights more, right?
Yes.
And so my neglected sense might be a different one during that period of time.
No, and that's a really, really good point. And that's also something, so I have another quiz if people know my work.
Give us all the quizzes. We love quizzes.
I love a quiz. Okay, so that's the 4 tendencies quiz. And that tells you whether you're an upholder, a questioner, an obliger, a rebel. And that's at GretchenRubin.com/quiz. You can get both quizzes there. And the thing, and I won't go into the 4 tendencies quiz, but the thing about the tendency is I really do believe you bring that into the world with you. It's hardwired. You're 1 at 5 years and 1 at 55 years. You're 1 at work and you're the same 1 at home. It doesn't change. But I think you're exactly right. I think that the neglected sense can change. And you can imagine, like, you're a young adult and you're practicing an instrument, you're going to concerts, you're listening to tons of new music, you're talking about music with your friends, you're reading music reviews, and then you have a baby, right? And you're like, all that stuff, no, it's all gathering dust in the corner. But when you realize it, you're like, okay, well, maybe I can't do what I did then, but now that I realize I'm neglecting something that at one time gave me great pleasure, how might I bring it into my life in a new way that's suitable for this season of life? And so, and I think you're right too. You're on vacation. And so you're like, you really are paying so much attention to the food because it's all new. You're going to a grocery store to see how it's different. Like you're touching the things, you're tasting something new. So I think it is something that is very much changes. It's responsive, but it's also something that we can consciously alter,
improve. Yeah. Awesome. And I guess and I know there's multiple, I'm asking my own questions and there's a few more that I want to get to that people asked beforehand, but when it comes to holding ourselves accountable on improving that neglected sense, for example, do you think it's better if we were to talk about accountability and community? Is it better for us to create pods of everybody that has the same neglected sense to brainstorm, or is it better to pair people and I want to know, like, what is my highest sense. I don't know if that was in the, is that in the
Right.
quiz?
Yeah, if you take the quiz, it'll tell you your
Most-
appreciated sense.
Okay,
Yes, yes,
okay. I
yes.
must have missed
What do
that
you
one, but
guess is your appreciated sense?
I think the touch one.
Do you
for
think the touch?
sure.
It's
Yeah.
your, well,
Or
and that makes sense.
taste.
Well,
Maybe
but that
yeah.
makes perfect sense if you're, if that's your love language too.
Yeah.
But so here's the funny thing about the appreciated is there are dominant, there are two that are clear winners. What do you guess? And again, this is not scientific. This is the this is the selection bias results.
Yeah.
What do you think are the two most appreciated?
I would think, so there's touch, listening,
Seeing,
seeing,
hearing, smelling,
and
tasting,
hearing.
touching.
The most appreciated ones, well, if I have to use the logic around like where do we derive pleasure from most easily, I would think hearing and tasting.
Bingo!
Oh my
well
God.
Done.
Oh,
Yes,
wow.
that is right.
I
That
feel
is
so
100%
validated.
correct.
I feel like the
No. And again, I expected that seeing would want to be one of
Yeah.
those, but maybe it's because of exactly
we're
what
so
you're saying.
overstimulated with
that
our
we're like,
gadgets.
Yeah, but then, and then
Totally.
there's something, there's special power to taste and there's special, but so here's the funny thing about me writing this book.
Yeah.
My two least appreciated senses
No way.
are tasting and hearing.
No
So I'm like the
way.
opposite of
That
most
is
people.
so
And I
interesting.
wonder if, like with the four tendencies, I'm a kind of rare tendency.
Yeah.
And with this, I'm kind of a rare combination. And I think that maybe when you're a little bit like not typical, you see things more clearly.
Yeah.
Because you kind of have a sense like, well, a lot of people, like I'm like, everybody else is like, you know,
You're unique, Gretchen.
yeah, but everybody's
You're
like a foodie. And I'm like, really? I went to lunch today with a friend and she picked a restaurant. She goes, well, it had a burger on the
Oh
on
my
the menu. So I knew you'd be happy.
Oh
And
my
I'm
God,
like,
that's so funny.
yeah,
Well,
that's
I
me.
think I'm overstimulated on taste. My husband's a big foodie and constantly, I mean, I shouldn't be complaining. We get to go to really great places, but I think there's so much pleasure that I associate with taste, and I maybe am, less attentive when I'm going on my walks outside, which I do pretty frequently, but I'm on my phone, I'm answering messages, awesome. Okay, so actually let's quickly talk. I feel like we covered a lot of them, but is there anything that you want, especially since we have a pretty even split, to talk about on, other senses, or do you think we covered most of them? I feel like we gave most of them a chance. Did we give touch? I feel like we didn't really talk about.
Here's a really fun thing that I just figured out about touch. And
Yeah.
maybe you don't need this because you're so aware of it, but this was a big breakthrough for me. Okay. So I was looking in my closet, as one does, wondering why there are certain items that I never seem to wear, even though I'm like, I like them and they look good.
Cute.
Like, why I never wear them? So I started trying to figure that out. And I had an insight, which was there are things that I like the way they look, but either they were button down cotton shirts and I don't like that feeling.
Yeah.
Or they were a beautiful color, but there was something like they were too tight or too heavy or too itchy or something. And I realized it's because when I'm looking in the mirror, and I do love the sense of sight. I would be like, oh, I can't resist something in this beautiful plummy purple, even though it wasn't quite right. Or like, this white button down shirt, how useful is this? Even though I don't like the way it feels. So now when I go to a dressing room, or I'm trying something on, I shut my eyes and I think, what does it feel like on my body? Because once you own it, you look in yourself in a mirror for 5 seconds and then you're wearing it all day. So if it's not comfortable, you're very aware of it.
Totally.
But I bought a pair of pants that I love. They were this blue kind of heathery. I mean, they were spectacular.
Yeah.
And I the minute I saw them, I fell in love, tried them on, bought them, was so excited. I got them home and they were so scratchy that they were literally bringing up like welts on my leg. And so I got this incredibly thick kind of frumpy pair of tights to be kind of like a lining. And it still was so like scratchy. I think it must have been that it was supposed to have a lining and then they decided that whatever. And I'm like, how did I literally did not notice this.
Oh my gosh.
In the dressing room. I tried them on. I loved them. It never occurred to me. And the minute I got them home and got away from the mirror, I couldn't stand them for one more minute. And so now I try to shut my eyes and allow that other sense to come to the front.
Yeah.
So that I am aware that this is really an important thing for me, which is how something feels on my body.
That's such a fun challenge. I mean, anybody who's going shopping, that's such a great challenge for us to do. I love that. I actually went for one of those experiences where they blindfold you and they make you like eat.
Oh, I did that too.
You did that in New York.
Yeah.
I did it in New York.
Yeah.
And
did you do it at Abigail's?
I think it was Abigail's.
Yeah.
And I just remember I went with, my husband, and we were so present, and like the taste of the food, we talked about it, and he was like listening 10x better than he normally does. And it's just a reminder.
Well, isn't it interesting how you have to listen because you have to stay oriented?
Exactly.
Did you keep reaching out to touch him? I had to keep reaching because I'm like,
where are
you?
Yeah,
you have to stay oriented.
Totally.
Yeah.
And because I've noticed, like when we go out for dinner normally, he'll look, or he'll get distracted, or he'll like look at something and start like talking about that, or I'll look at something.
Yeah.
And so it was awesome to just give like 2 or 3 senses like full attention.
Yes.
And so as I'm reading your book, I'm thinking, it's okay to not feel all 5 senses at once. Like you can pick and choose and give every sense its fair shot.
No, and that's why light's lower for a concert. That's why we close our eyes when we're kissing.
Yeah.
Because I'm a fearful driver and I turn down the radio when I'm driving so I can see better. We will do that. We'll bring down certain kind of stimulation so that we have more kind of bandwidth. That's so interesting. Absolutely. Yeah.
Love that. Awesome. Okay. So tell me, in the book, you recognize that we all have our own sensory worlds. I think we talked a little bit about this. Are there any additional tips and strategies that you can use when attempting to cultivate an environment that suits your sensory preferences while also taking this into consideration?
Well, I think it's exactly what you said, which is, what are your sensory preferences? Because I think a lot of times you're just sort of like, if it's fun for the whole family, it's fun for me.
Yeah.
Or, you've set something up kind of in a makeshift way, work from home, and you've never really thought about it. And so I think part of it is really to say to yourself, like, are these notifications on my phone distracting me? Do I really need them? Like, why don't I turn them off? Or I'm really distracted by my phone. I'm going to turn my screen to grayscale. So it's only black, white, and gray. So it's going to be a lot less interesting to use. It's going to be a lot easier for me to turn it down. Okay. So Meha, here's my question for you. If you want to do your most intense work, like you really need to focus and be productive. Do you want silence? Do you want a busy hum like a coffee shop? Do you want music with words, music without words? Do you want the same song on a loop? Strangely, some people will listen to the same song for like 8 hours straight. Or do you want like white noise, like a fan or like running water? What is your sensory preference for focus?
Do you have a guess?
I would say music without words.
Okay, very close. So it depends. So there's 2 modes.
It depends. It depends. 2 modes. Okay, so
2 modes.
So here's the thing: sensory preferences, right? This is refined. Okay.
Yeah. So it's always big Bose noise canceling headphones.
Okay.
Back when I was a software engineer, it was, like always, like I was not writing, I was writing in code. So I could listen to words with words, any words. I literally have to listen to like hip hop or like Indian music. So if I'm writing, then it needs to be in Hindi or Punjabi or something else, so it doesn't distract me with, like English words.
So it has words, but you're not understanding them.
Yeah. So if I need to feel pumped, or I can understand, but it's in a totally different language, so it's not making my brain. Yeah. So I'm not singing along, but it's like, it makes me feel like I'm at a club. So if I'm in a pump up, like go-getter mode and not in a super reflective, like I want to feel calm and focused mode, I listen to like stuff I could hear at a club, or like a mashup by a DJ. Like that's what I'm listening to. Okay. With a big bass, like a high bass. And then if I am like feeling a little anxious or stressed and I need to like recenter and get back into focus mode, then it is typically like instrumental pop or something like that. So, but it is always like, I can't do silence. I hate libraries. I never worked at libraries. I always worked at coffee shops.
And I'm exactly the opposite. I love silence, or I will work in a coffee shop. I would never listen to music. Isn't that interesting?
That's so interesting.
So all this is just a good example of like, people are really different in their sensory preferences. And sometimes we're very aware of it. Like you have a very refined sense of what works for you. But sometimes you might not even be that aware of it. or like if you need to calm down, it's like, well,
Yeah.
what can you do that like specifically in your environment that
Yeah.
might bring you calm? Like, I mean, as a touch person, like I
Yeah.
love having like a fidget toy, like on a
Yeah.
long Zoom call or
Yeah.
something. It helps me to have something to do. My daughter just told me the sweetest story. I didn't even know this. When she was in 4th grade, she was like, it's the last year where the teacher would read aloud to us. And she had a basket of stuffed animals, and we would go get a stuffed animal. And we would sit cross-legged on the floor and like hold our stuffed animals.
So
And I
cute.
thought, this is really smart, because holding the stuffed animal, like, I
Yeah.
think that would really ground and
Yeah.
calm a child, help them to be attentive.
Yep.
Like, and I think as an adult, like, you know, I always hold a pen in my hand
Yeah.
when I need to calm down. If I'm feeling
Yeah.
anxious, I hold a pen. When I'm
Yeah.
speaking sometimes, or I'm in a cocktail party, you're like,
Yeah.
why does Gretchen have a pen in her hand? Because
Yeah.
that makes me feel calm. So some people use mugs or
That's so
clipboards, or
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you can think about, well, what are the things, like, is there something that if I hold on to it, it's going to make me calmer? Or like you say, using money, music to pump yourself up. That's
Yeah.
I think that's very widely
Yeah.
understood. But like,
Yeah.
I love sense of smell. I will use
Yeah.
I have like a beautiful hay smell. It's my lucky smell. And it
Wow.
gives me this sense of like cheer and energy. And I
Yeah.
save it. Like my daughters will even say like, ooh, it's the hay smell.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you know, this is like, I don't use that every day.
Yeah.
And I don't
special
even
days.
like wear it as perfume. I just
Yeah.
smell it, and like it gives me kind of a
Totally.
rush. Yeah. And you hear about people using, you wouldn't want to do this at work, obviously, because many
Yeah.
people would not like it. But if you're working from home, like using a scented candle as like
Yeah.
part of a ritual of like, okay,
Yes.
now I'm going to sit down and focus, or now I'm going to get
Yeah.
calm.
Yeah. Or like an aroma diffuser or something like that.
Exactly,
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that. But you could
Yeah.
imagine maybe you want to take a hot shower. And
Yeah.
that's what's, you know, a lot of people will calm themselves. Here's something interesting. Some people, when they need to calm down, and I'm like this, they bring down their sensory stimulation.
Yeah.
So like if I'm really stressed out, I wear perfume to bed. I won't wear
Yeah.
perfume to bed. If somebody else is playing
Yeah.
music in my house, I'm
Yeah.
like the Scroogey person who turns it off. I'm trying to bring it down. I'll reread
Yeah.
a book instead of reading
Yeah.
something new.
Yeah.
But then other people, I was surprised to learn, they feel calmer when they really pump up
Yeah.
so they'll
Totally.
eat spicy food, or
That's-
bite into a lemon, or
that's
put
me.
an ice cube in their mouth, or
Yeah.
plunge their, this is you. So what, like
I'm
pump up
not
the
as bad
music
as like
really
the
loud.
ice plunge situation, but I feel like when I'm stressed, I'll like blast up some, you know, like things I danced to in college, like not even work appropriate.
Right.
But that like calms me down because it's like active rest for me.
Right. But see, and this is the thing again, like we all have to think about ourselves and what kind of sensory stimulation and sensory environment
Yeah.
works for us, because
Yeah.
it might be very counterintuitive. It might be everybody else is like, oh, this is terrible. Like, of
And
course you
if-
can't listen to this kind of music if
Yeah.
you're feeling anxious. And you're like, no, I know what I need. This works for me. Right.
Yeah.
And you're probably not the only one. And indeed, there's a bunch of people who, you know,
Yeah,
like
totally.
they're sucking on an ice cube
Yeah.
when they need to calm down.
So like you mentioned, I feel like both of us are pretty self-aware of like what works for us and all of that. But
I
if
am
we-
now that I wrote the book.
Yeah, exactly. And I am
yeah.
now that I've read the book. So I think, I guess for those, in addition to reading the book, when it comes to actionable steps, daily routines, talk to us on what are those key tips that you have, especially for those that are not yet aware, like what kind of experiments should they map it to, like, you know, we have a mood tracker. So should they be tracking certain things that they're doing back to how they feel emotionally?
Well, that could be a great thing to add to your tracker, which is like, you know, feeling calm.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of, you know, 10 minutes, you know, petting my dog, which is something that a lot of people will find very, very calming. Or, you know, feeling anxious, you know, coming out of that loud conference. And then, so maybe over time you start to see, okay, it seems like if you're in a really loud place, that might kind of like bring your anxiety level up.
Right.
And so then you could start to be like, you know what, if I'm going to be in this place where there's just going to be like lots of chatter and lots of noise, maybe every 10 minutes I need to walk outside, walk around the block, give myself some silence, because that's going to help me manage something that I'm, you know, so I think it can be very helpful for patterns. Here's a pattern that a lot of people experience, which is when they feel kind of low energy, kind of low mood, they reach for a snack. Because this is a very easy way to kind of jack ourselves up.
Yep.
And so, but what I found, in a lot of people have told me it works for them, you're reaching for the sense of taste, but you could reach for a different sense.
Yeah.
So maybe for you, it's like blasting some music,
Yeah.
or for me, it's like, ooh, I'm going to go smell something I'm going to go smell
Yeah.
my fresh towels,
Yeah.
or, go smell a hardware store. I love the smell of a hardware store. Or like just the smell of vanilla. Or maybe if you love touch, it's like you're gonna there's like fake fur blankets that are like kind of uncannily soft and wonderful, and you're just or like sandpaper, just to give yourself that sense of like stimulation that
Totally.
so, and for some people it might be arousing, and for other people it might be kind of calming and soothing, but you can do that instead of turning to your sense of taste, if that's what you always turn to, or if you feel like you're kind of reaching for unhealthy snacks. I know from writing my book Better Than Before, that's all about habit change, that's a habit that a lot of people say that they want to change, is they want to stop unhealthy snacking, but this is still giving yourself a treat. And whether it works because it just distracts you. So because instead of like heading for the snack, you're heading for the, the music. Or because it really is just a sense that the body is seeking some kind of stimulation and you're just subbing in. I don't know. It probably doesn't matter. And it's probably a little bit of both. But many people report that this helps them like kind of manage that urge.
That's awesome. Okay, one more question, then I want to get into our self-portraits exercise. And I think that would really be a great opportunity for us to also discuss bringing it to your everyday. But I really loved this question. How has, especially because you talked about this in the beginning with your family, and I'm thinking about this because when I blast the music, my husband's like, Alexa, volume 1, it's not his, that's not his relaxation mode. So how has studying the 5 senses deepened your relationships with the people in your life? I think we've talked about with yourself, but it's interesting because you have to pay attention to other people and you're probably noticing things, but then maybe do you ever have to sacrifice your own senses to accommodate when you're in a collective space?
No, absolutely you do. And I mean, I think this is one of the great challenges because we really do. It's sort of like, and I think some people want to kind of find the right way or like the best way, but it's very often just preferences. And I think it can really just be helpful to be like, it's not that one of us is right and one of us is wrong. It's just that like, this is my preference. This is your preference. So how do we create an environment where everyone can thrive? And a place where you see this coming up a lot is in the open plan office. This is leading to a lot of conflict and a lot of frustration where people just are not able to manage their spaces. It's just not realistic. So, but if you can have an open conversation about it, that might help you just kind of like get to a place of cooperation more easily. But really, like, if you were going to say, what's the secret to a happy life? It's relationships with other people. That's the most important thing. And I thought that I would be able to use the 5 senses. The 5 senses are like the Swiss Army knife. Anything you want to achieve, any aim you're aiming for, the 5 senses is going to help you do that. But for drawing me closer in a lot of ways, one is like by evoking memories. And so like, I did a taste timeline of my kind of the taste of my life. And then I called my sister, Elizabeth, and we talked about it. And it was so much fun. We remembered so many things. We were laughing about how like she would drink the pickle juice from the pickle jar. And
oh my gosh,
she lit the toaster on fire because she would always like put butter on her saltines and melt them. I mean, we just had, our grandparents, coffee cake can, all these things came back. It drew us closer, because like my memories of my taste of childhood are her memories. So we really, it drew us closer. And then also you can share it, just like you and your husband having this kind of taste adventure. It's like, this is something you go out. How many times have you been out to eat in your life? Bazillion. But this you'll remember because there was something about it that was intensely sensory in a way that really connected you. And so this is a way, a sound bath. My sister is like always talks about sound baths. I thought everybody did sound bath. How many? Tell me in the chat. Have you heard of a sound bath? Because it turns out nobody's does sound baths.
I've heard of it. I've never done it though.
I thought everybody was doing it. Anyway, this was, this is a really fun thing to do. I had a friend and she's like, it's just something different to do. You can connect through your senses. And like, okay, good. This is great. All these people, I love sound baths.
It's popping in the chat.
People are okay. Clearly this is something we gotta, you've got a very hip audience here. They're like on the cutting edge. But it's like, it's a different way because you think of like, oh, let's go out for a cup of coffee. And that's wonderful, but you can connect in these other ways. And then in a sense, and it's also really helpful. Here's a hack. If you're in a place where you've got to make conversation with somebody and you like, I have nothing to say to this person, think about how can I comment on the sensory experience that both of us are experiencing right now together. This
Yeah.
is something that is rooting us to the moment,
Yeah.
and we are both experiencing it together. So, oh, I love the art in this place, or I like this song, but I don't remember the name or the artist. Do you remember? Or "Ooh, have you tried the hors d'oeuvres?"
Yeah.
Or, I mean, it's a way to connect and to get started,
Totally.
and it's a play. And if you notice, if you go to like shows, like
Yeah.
concerts or stand-up comedians or whatever,
Right.
they will often begin by saying something about where they are. Like, oh, this, oh, I almost tripped over the stairs.
Yeah.
Like there's just
Yeah.
or like the creaky things, or it was hard to
Yeah.
find this place, because what they're saying is, I'm here with you now. We are
Yeah.
sharing
The
this
space.
experience.
Yeah.
It's not that I could be anywhere else. I'm with you now,
Yeah.
because I see what you see. I hear what you hear. And it's very, very effective. And it's a great kind of way to get started. Because sometimes I'm like, I literally can't think of anything to say. I want to be polite. I want to be friendly, but
I
like,
want to
what the
connect,
heck?
but what do you start with? Yeah.
What do you start
Totally.
with, right? You
Yeah.
can always start with the weather. That's good.
Yeah.
And that's a sensory experience as well. That's why it works very effectively. But sometimes it's just the same weather, and you're like, okay, I got to come up with something else.
Yeah, totally. Well, being the overachiever that I am, next time I go to dinner with someone I know well, I feel like I'm going to do all five senses. I'm going to say what I notice about each of the five senses, so I can raise all those levels up.
Yeah.
But awesome. Okay. I know we are chatting away. This is like Gretchen and I love this stuff. So thank you all for hanging with us. We have a really fun exercise that we want to do in true Silk and Sonder fashion. Fireside chats are even fiery when we throw in an interactive activity. So we're not going to give the full 5 minutes, just in the interest of time. Let's give like 2 or 3 minutes, Gretchen. But why don't you introduce the self-portrait exercise? It looks like this. You guys should have received a printable. And if not, no worries. Gretchen's going to go over it, and you don't have to fill out the whole thing.
Right.
And it's in the journal.
It's in the journal. Yeah. This is a 5 senses journal. So for each day, you can write down like a notable memory for seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. But it also gives you room to do a 5 senses portrait, which is what we're going to do now. So with the 5 senses portrait, you're gonna seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. You're gonna think of a person who you love. Like I did one for my husband. People often will choose to do it for someone who's died, as a way to like bring back those very concrete memories. It could be for a place that you love. It could be for an experience that you love, like like your honeymoon or an amazing camping trip. It could be for a pet. It could be for anything that's a sensory person or experience that you want to capture. And so you're trying to think of 5 notable or favorite memories for each of the senses. So you'll come, like if you did the whole thing, you would come up with 25. And this is just something that people love. It makes it's so creative. It brings back so many memories. And it makes a wonderful gift, because people feel so recognized when they see all the actual impressions that they make on you. And you really feel like you're capturing someone's essence.
Yeah.
And yet it's not that hard. Like the execution is just like a sentence.
You can't mess it up. Yeah.
You can't mess it up. There's no right way or wrong way. So we're all going to do it a little bit, right?
Yes,
now.
We are. And then we can listen to some music. Let's put 3 minutes on the clock, Silk and Sonder team. And again, you don't need to finish the whole thing. Just go ahead and pick your subject, drop your subjects in the chat, and start. Thank you, team, for sharing. This was fun. I ended up choosing Healdsburg, which is in Northern California, and it happens to be the city where I was engaged, and I'm going for my 1-year wedding anniversary this weekend, actually. So when you kind of labeled it as memories, I approached the exercise a little bit differently than I had done in the past. So that was really, really helpful. And nostalgic. Like it just, I think the types of things that came up for me, I've only been there a handful of times, but I remember, the violinist playing my favorite country song when I was first getting proposed to. And then more recently, I talked about the site of, her name was Mary. She's a winery owner. She used to be an OB/GYN, and then this is her second life. We clearly have a soft spot for those of us that choose second paths, but I just remember her smile and her joy as she was sharing her story. So it was interesting. The memories kind of bled into multiple senses, some of it. And then of course the taste of the wine and like holding the stem of a fancy wine glass, like all of these memories and specifics was just
You know what would be
delightful.
fun is if you did it every time. I imagine since it's already so meaningful to you, you'll go back many times.
Yeah.
If you did it every time, then you would have this amazing keepsake of like this place as it changed, as you changed.
Yeah.
And then
can I put it in my in the journal that that's great. I love that idea. That's perfect homework for the weekend.
Well, and it's interesting because some people use the journal like a keepsake, like for their their period that they're getting married, or their first 6 months of their new baby, or like in a new house or a new job, because it's just like, I want to hang on to all those sensory experiences.
Awesome. Well, anything else, like tell me if there's anything else on the Five Senses portrait that you think people should take away, either as homework, also a place to discuss, Sonder Club and your app is a great place for us to not just stop here, right? It's awesome when you can share it and inspire others to think about memories, but any other tips?
Well, it's one thing that you said kind of offhandedly, there's no right way or wrong way, so don't stress yourself out. And also, this is something that people kind of enjoy doing as groups. So you could do it like at a family dinner, or as a couple, or like as a family to give as a gift. Like sometimes or like you just all went through an experience together. It can be like a highlights reel. So that can be really fun. And if you're trying to connect with people that you don't know yet, this could be a great way where like, because if somebody was describing like their grandmother, like in their, like you would get such a sense of like so much about them, their background, their traditions, what's important to them, like in this way that's very intimate, but also is like you can talk about without feeling like you're invading someone's privacy.
Absolutely.
Like it's this nice thing where it's warm and it's intimate, but it's also it doesn't cross boundaries that people might feel uncomfortable with, where sometimes when you're trying to like connect with new people, it can be hard to navigate that sometimes.
100%.
And so this is a great icebreaker, and it would be a great kind of creative project for people to do and then to discuss and then to connect with.
We should definitely do another Sonder social where everyone does comes with their exercise and then shares, because it's and they're powerful.
Endlessly fascinating. It's like I could read 1,000 of these, because you're like, I get you, Atlanta, Georgia, or like, oh, I know that uncle, or, that dog or whatever.
Totally. Well, I recommend that people fill this out and take a picture and either post it on social and tag us, because the more that we can get others to do this kind of work, the more we all connect better.
Well, and speaking of social, we've got to mention the giveaway. So we're going to be giving away a free Five Senses journal, which is this one, and the life workbook. And so visit us on Instagram and get all the information on that. That's a super fun giveaway.
Awesome. Great. Okay. So to close us out, I know it's almost at time, so if people have to hop, totally understand, but you might want to wait, because I want Gretchen to read her favorite passage from Life in Five Senses. Since I was a little girl, there's nothing like hearing from the author themselves. And so would love for you to close us out with your favorite section.
Okay.
And we'll quietly listen.
Okay. So this is from the introduction where I'm explaining what I'm doing. And I say, I wasn't sleepwalking through my days. I spent hours reading, writing, and talking to people. I kept lists, made plans, and set goals. I tracked the number of steps I took. I existed in a constant process of self-examination. How do I grow into the person I think I could become? But while I valued the intensity, productivity, and structure of my life, that walk home had revealed that I'd been allowing the sensations of my life to slip away unobserved. If I focused on the experiences of my senses, what could I discover? That pink eye afternoon had revealed 3 truths. I wanted to appreciate the moments of my life more fully. I wanted to get out of my head and into my life. I wanted to deepen my knowledge of the world, of other people, and of myself. During that walk, I felt intense vitality because I'd paid such close attention to the sensations streaming through me, and that experience showed me the way forward. I would study my 5 senses. I didn't want to miss another minute.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome. I loved it. Again, get your books. We dropped the link. We'll send all the info after. And then if you want to chat about it, we'll be in Sonder Club discussing it in August, all month long. Anything else? Is there anything else? Any parting advice or words?
Would I just have to tell you something fun about the book? Because I wanted to, one of my things is to look for the overlooked, which is very hard to do.
Yes.
There's something hidden somewhere on the, not necessarily on the cover, but on the jacket. There's a hidden icon. There's something that's hidden. If you see it, you'll know it, but it's hard to find. So I know you love that kind of thing, Meha.
I do.
So try that. It's a good, and people have found it. So
oh, they've already found it. Oh
no,
my God.
no, people, it can be found.
Okay.
When you see it, you'll know it. Yeah.
You know, you're bringing the Aries competitive side out.
Oh, there, you got to do it. You'll email me later. But the thing I would just say is that this really is, if you want to calm down or you want to pump up, if you want to spark creativity or you want to get more focused, you want to connect with other people, you want to appreciate the moment, you want to connect to the past, whatever your aim that you're seeking, there's a way to tap into your 5 senses to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gretchen. You are so insightful, so inspiring. And honestly, I wouldn't have started Silk and Sonder if it wasn't for your work. So just really appreciate it.
So much to me.
Yes.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Cannot wait to continue to see everything that you do and hopefully have another chat with you soon.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're all about like exciting sensory experiences and using the tactile to get into our minds. So it was such a joy to talk to you.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you, everyone. Happy Thursday.